Thank you, and good afternoon. When I was looking at the adult population that we deal with across this range of services, I didn't just realise then, but it reinforced for me again that, adult is really just an all-encompassing term for people across a broad range of age groups and a broad range of people who have had different developmental experiences. Within the Salvation Army, the section that I'm from, we're the administration arm for Queensland, New South Wales and the ACT. So within that we have 8 residential therapeutic communities comprising some 550 beds. We have 4 inpatient withdrawal management units. We support 75 community-based day programs that are delivered through other Salvation Army services, such as a local church or a welfare service, where they're dealing with people with drug and alcohol problems. We have an opioid substitution treatment support program, as well as 5-day program or our client services. Our main thrust of service delivery within our department are these 8 residential TCs, which in the Queensland context, Normanton and Mount Isa, which are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander specific services, and then our more general population services are at Townsville, Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And of course New South Wales, but we're still a bit depressed, I guess, about the state of origin outcome. Although I did hear that New South Wales, they released the economic indices the other day, and New South Wales's economy is now stronger than Queensland, so at least we've got a win somewhere. So just looking at who these adults are across these services, in a group of around 2,285 people that agreed to be part of a research project that we're involved with the University of Wollongong, and in particular the Illawarra Institute for Mental Health, we found that the average age of the people who are coming into our services for women is 37 and for men is 36 years of age. So, and I'll have a look at some figures in a minute in relation to roughly how that breaks up across some other age groups, but in the main that's the age group that we deal with. Also, you'll see the disparity in terms of the numbers of men and women, and that seems to be generally represented right across the drug and alcohol sector. So within the Queensland context, and in particular just across Townsville, Brisbane and the Gold Coast, but also reflected within our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services, that's how kind of those middle year age groups break up. Now our services deal with people from 18 years of age and up. The Salvation Army operates youth-specific services, but they sit in another department. So our brief in terms of what happens in the Salvation Army in the drug and alcohol space is 18 years and over. The 3 main age groups that are represented right across the board are those ones there, 25 to 34, 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. So they take in the bulk of people who present to us. Having said that, today there's an 18-year-old in one of those services, or, in a few of those services, but the eldest person in one of our services today is 74 years of age. Of the people that are able to, complete treatment, and treatment completion within the context of our program is the completion of their treatment goals, the achievement of treatment goals, as opposed to people staying X amount of time, because time in treatment is not really a proxy for recovery. What is a good indicator of recovery is people having a case plan in place and working across that. So the treatment completers also reflect the pattern of admissions in terms of the gender split, and the average length of stay for someone who does complete is around that 200-day mark. And as I said, that treatment completion is determined by the achievement of case goals. That's what we see in terms of the substances. And again, they're evenly split across those genders in relation to the same patterns of admissions and treatment completers. So when it comes to people, or in particular adults, you look at, drug and alcohol services. There are services that deal with, people under 14 years of age. There's, the youth services, which are 14 to 25. There's, kind of that young adult subgrouping, which I guess could be that 18 years and plus, the space that we begin to start doing our work in. So, there's a lot of crossover in relation to defining what is an adult. If you have a youth service which defines its target group as, say, 14 to 25, well, we're kind of in the same space saying, well, we're dealing with 18 years and over, and we're within an adult service provision context. I've seen, one agency that defines adults as being 16 years and over. So there's a lot of, disparity out there, or a lot of different views as to what constitutes an adult. And I guess that's mirrored too in the community where, we might look at someone between 14 and 25 as youth for argument's sake, yet, at 18 you can have the vote, and, you can sign up for the armed forces, and you can go overseas, and you can fight in a war. But, within another context, you'll be seen as a youth. We have 22-year-olds who are signing, multi-million-dollar, sporting contracts, who are really high achievers in the community. And, they're very young people, but in a sense they're youth. But in another sense, they're leading a very adult life. We have parents at 16, parents at 26, parents at 36, and, parents at 46, and so on. So there is a lot of crossover, and I think, the issue around that for services such as ours, which really does take in a broad spread of age groups, is to look at who are we dealing with and what are their developmental needs. How do we provide a service to a 20-year-old ICE user, and how do we provide a service to a 60-year-old alcoholic within the context of the same service setting and within the context of, basically what is a similar service delivery paradigm? So we have to look at how people develop into being what is an adult and move it away from the construct of the numbers. Looking at, biologically, and we're programmed biologically to mature at certain ages, puberty and senility back at the top end of it, Socially, what are the role expectations of people? What is it that out in society, in terms of who we are as individuals, that determines whether we're, a young person, or we're an adult, or we're middle-aged, or we're elderly? So what are the role expectations societally around what would determine if I'm an adult? Naturally enough, there's a legal construct around, when people are considered to be adults, such as, there's triggers around it. 16-year-old's about to hit one of them shortly, within the next week, where she's lining up to go down and get her learner's permit to drive the car. I don't know what car she's going to drive because she's not getting near mine, but anyway, we'll sort that out when it happens. But yeah, so, that's one trigger. The other trigger is, getting the vote at 18. And, I don't think that'll be too much of a developmental challenge for her, because she formed her own political party when she was 10. So, and when she was in primary school, it's still on the web. She made a website up about it, the Peace Party, and she had a Minister for Transport and a Minister for Health and all that. So I think she's looking forward to getting the vote. There's those cognitive milestones that determine, that transition from, childhood to adolescence to, young adulthood, middle-aged adulthood and elderly. And there's also the life experiences that impact on people that influence that process of maturation. And I'm sure within the context of your work within the drug and alcohol sector, you certainly would have seen, very, very mature young people, who had grown up sort of, because of their life experiences, into adults maybe before they biologically, socially, legally or cognitively were ready to do that. And then sitting behind it, that is, of course, all of those theories of psychosocial development that, that kind of influence some of these decisions. So across, the treatment population, adults get represented in all of those age groups and at all of those developmental stages. And, that in itself presents the particular challenges within our context, within residential services in terms of the bulk of what our work presents in, and how do we deal with, people whose developmental needs, their emotional needs, their psychological needs, their life needs, their lifestyle needs differ within that context. As I said, the two separate groupings of, say, the 20-year-old ice user and the 60-year-old alcoholic. So it's about determining, within the context of that, who we're dealing with. So to respond to that, we have to be looking at and analysing the pattern of people who come in, tweaking within our services, various streams, various activities and subgroupings within the overall client group, so that we're actually dealing with the adult within their own particular adult context, because adults are not an homogenous group. They're very different. One of my other daughters is 27, and she's in America. She saved up and got a holiday, and she's been there for about 7 weeks, and I got a message from her, could I put some money in her bank account? She spent too much, and I'm thinking, oh, you're an adult. You should be looking after yourself, but she's always going to be my child, so I will always do that, Not that she's using that because, you do say no, but that's what I mean in terms of what the context is in terms of how people are looked at. So treatment needs of adults are many and varied. So, you might have, elderly people and we have this in our services, whose presentation is the overuse of prescription meds, where, for years they've been on certain medications and, those medications are actually now, become an addiction for them. There's also age-related conditions as well as the drug and alcohol treatment that we need to deal with. Various things like, onset of dementia, particularly early onset of dementia as a result of, alcohol damage to the brain, menopause, eyesight, weight gain, and the consequential issues that brings, things like diabetes, heart disease, etc., and things like balance and gait problems in people that are kind of have long histories of drug and alcohol abuse, and who are sort of maybe at the top end of that middle-aged age bracket. And then, of course, all of the lifestyle-related issues that come with that smoking, digestive tract problems, liver disease, etc., which you may not necessarily get presented in a 25-year-old, but you would see probably in your 55 or your 65-year-old. So the other treatment needs over and above the actual drug and alcohol intervention are different as well. So case plans need to reflect that. The medical care and support that we provide for people that are in our services, they need to be reflective of that as well. And we need to be conscious of that in terms of how we put services together and what staffing mix that we might need to be able to meet that need. And then there's that kind of onset through the natural ageing process, outside of the impact of the drug and alcohol use, that just, general onset through living of, the chronic health conditions. We know that, as people age, they become higher consumers of medical services. And that creates for us, as a service provider, issues in being able to access those services within the areas in which our services are located. So, for argument's sake, if we have a service in Brisbane and someone comes to that service from, say, Roma, then, they've gone from one HHS to another HHS and they're consuming services within that. Within the context of New South Wales, someone might come to our Central Coast service, in which case, we sit in Central Coast Local Health District, and they may have come from Sydney or Newcastle or even Burke to our service. And the first question that gets asked by hospital-based services that we want to access is, why are you bringing these people into our health district? They should have got this sorted out before they came here so that they're not consuming our services. So that's the type of thing that we have to deal with. But, as people are ageing, all of these things that are chronic disease that people are subject to anyway through normal life, but exacerbated by drug and alcohol use, become more of a complexity in terms of building case plans and making sure that the right type of treatment is in place. So case plans have to include this comprehensive need assessment, such as, looking at family. And for family, it can mean that they're a spouse of someone, they're a parent to someone, or they're a child of someone. An adult can be one or all of those things. What the job skills are there existing job skills or is job skill training needed for them? So, you can have, like that young 20-year-old ICE user, he may never have, or she may never have, had an employment history, qualification to fall back on, may have incomplete schooling, which, a lot of the people who come into our services do have, as opposed to the 60-year-old alcoholic who might have, had a working career, have some skill, have some knowledge, training, maybe even a qualification at a trade or tertiary level to fall back on to get back into the workforce. So again, the issue around job skills and access to a labour market is vitally important, and one that we need to take into account when we look at the needs assessment of people. There's the housing issue, people who come from homeless situations, people who come from shared accommodation, people who are in rental accommodation, people that are in public housing, or people that own their own property. They're all represented within the treatment population. So the housing needs, again, are another area in which we need to look, because we know that, the two key indicators for people achieving some sort of lasting change, two of the key factors in that are, appropriate accommodation and employment. And, without those two being in place, people kind of are behind the eight ball in relation to maintaining that change. And as I mentioned before, healthcare, age-appropriate healthcare. So, what are the needs, the health needs of a 50-year-old as opposed to the health needs of a 25-year-old? What are the dental and mental health complications, and what are the digestive tract, lifestyle illnesses like diabetes and smoking-related illnesses and stuff like that. So, those things also need to be taken into account. And then there's aftercare. For some people, that's referral into aged care. I guess, as a Salvation Army, we're somewhat fortunate in that there's another department in the Salvation Army that does provide aged care. So, we're able to work with them through the aged care assessment teams to, kind of facilitate, access. But, that's been tightened up since the 1st of July, yeah. So that's been tightened up a little bit by the federal government, but, there is still that issue about, people that are not going back into the workplace, who don't have accommodation, and how do we fit them into an appropriate living environment for them post-treatment. And also, in relation to family support, are they the supporter in the family, even though they're the person with the addiction? Like, are they the parent? Are they the working spouse? What is it that they need to do, as well as, of course, the family support that's needed in relation to the person's drug and alcohol problem and their recovery. So these are kind of some of the complexities that come with adults. And again, for younger people, it's a situation of, fitting young people back in with their family, because often their most potent memory of the person prior to coming into treatment is them at their worst. Some of the considerations around the treatment planning that we need to look at is, the older a person gets, obviously the greater the history of lifetime drug use of any different kind. The different cultural norms that they have for their age group, which also influence things like the types of drugs that have been used, the different attitudes about drug use. Because, if you believe what you see on a current affair about ICE users, then you know that they're absolutely psychotic, violent people that want to rip your eyes out and eat them if they haven't eaten their own already. So, where you have someone who's an ICE user coming into a treatment population where you've got older people who are in there for an alcohol problem, for argument's sake, who have never lived that lifestyle or been exposed to it, then you've got, severe, attitudinal problems that need to be worked through. And also, as I mentioned before, this increase in the use of prescription medications amongst older people. So to overcome this, we've had to intentionally make sure that we develop these, strong service level arrangements with, organisations that are outside of the usual drug and alcohol sector relationships that we have. So it's things like, aged care teams, for those that are at that end at which they haven't got accommodation, they won't be going back into the workforce, we can't access public housing, they're not able to look after themselves. Things like, employment services that target younger people, employment services that can target older people. What's the job market in their locale like for people their age? Because all of the stuff that happens out there in terms of the job market impacts our clients as well. Things like, ageism in relation to applicants, where, the younger person will be preferred over the person who might be in maybe, late 40s, early 50s, so they might prefer a younger person over that. Increases in unemployment rate within areas that have high pockets of youth unemployment, such as where our Central Coast service is located at Duralong, which is near Wyong on the Central Coast. Wyong is one of the areas of New South Wales that has the highest rate of youth unemployment. So younger people coming into our service, that 18 to 25 year age group, who come from that local area, their job prospects, are diminished in relation to, say, a young person who might be in the Sydney metro area that has access to a number of different labour markets. Also, our internal service systems need to be able to respond, to these, very unique, peculiar and particular social and developmental needs of people. We might have an 18 or a 19-year-old that's, distressed because there's a separation with them from their family of origin. We could have a 55-year-old in our service whose family are now saying, well, we're finished with you, they're shot of you, the salvos have got you, never come back. So, they're looking at marriage breakup, they're looking at loss of contact with kids, they're looking at losing their home or the place where they live. So, whatever the developmental needs of the people are, and they are different. And then the learning needs and how, that whole adult learning theory that sits around the psychoeducation part of drug treatment, and how younger people learn differently than the middle-aged people learn because they simply compute things differently, they understand things differently, and they assimilate it to their own lifestyle differently. So across the age groups, we have this huge disparity in terms of who we're dealing with. When we say adult, within the context of our brief, within a range of services the Salvation Army provides, we're providing services to people 18 years and over. Some of them are actually youth, because youth can be 14 to 25, or some of them can be adults, because in one context an adult is someone that's over 16. In another context, from a legal perspective, an adult can be someone that's over 18. So we're dealing with this kind of broader definition, and that in itself presents challenges. So what we do is, we develop particular streams and groups and activities within our services that meet the needs of different groups, so that the activity and social and recreational type of things that we put on for younger people are more prominent in terms of their daily and weekly routine while they're in treatment than they are for older people who may be looking for something a little bit different rather than the activity-based stuff that the younger people need to have. And it's in terms of having a look at and mapping what the adults are that we're dealing with, what are the age groups, what are the key age groups that we're dealing with. And it's not about driving all of our resources just into key age groups, because each person in each age group is equally important and has that equal need for service as anyone in any of the other age groups, and it's about making sure that the treatment is targeted, that it meets the age-appropriate adult developmental and treatment needs of the person, that it attends to their adult age-appropriate social, biological, which includes their physical and mental health, their biological needs, as well as things like employment and housing, which are vitally important post-treatment, and also reintegration, if it's possible, with their family, whether that means they're a parent in the family, whether they're a child in the family, or whether they're a spouse. That's it. Thank you.
Small gift for you, Gerard. Now, do we have any questions? We've got a bit of time for questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Gerard? Yes.
Well, the fortunate thing about both those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services is that we deal with individuals, couples, and also families, and we have the elders from the local community involved in the service, and we have cultural events happening at the service all the time, and it's through that process that we're able to identify who the elders are that are of influence, because not every elder's got influence over every person, because, within the different families, someone may recognise someone else as an elder, but within the context of, say, like the Kalkadoon people, for argument's sake, at Mount Isa, there are key community people that are recognised within the community, and it's important that we have, as I mentioned before, those strong external relationships, so strong external relationships with those people. In Normanton, there are 3 Aboriginal clans that live around the Normanton area, and it's about making sure that if there's people in the program that need to be influenced by an elder, that it's an elder from their tribe, and that's that person has that position in their life. And the other thing is the family relationships, and family relationships are very important. So we take direction from the local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people about that, and they advise us in relation to who should be talking to who about what.
Any more questions? Yes, one more.
Sometimes it's mediation between, and look, often it's about people who don't know or don't understand, and so it's about getting people together and talking to them. Within the context of the therapeutic community, people have a lot of, contact through the day, through the, various house activities they're involved in and informal program activities. And where we see that happening, we get people down, we sit them down and we talk to them. And once people get to know each other, and that really is the key to overcoming, those things within the context of the residential treatment population, is to get people to know each other. Because, we do have a situation where, we might have someone who's, say 60-year-old and an alcoholic and, who thinks drug addicts are really just the scum of the earth, and why are they doing that? You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, when you make that person human to them, their approach to them shifts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gerard Byrne.
Thank you.
Join me in thanking Gerard.